In yesterday's stream, we got a few more sneak peeks as to the rest of the Spire Coast and the top of the Dune Cliffs and the painstaking process for Hannah, which she took in order for it to get to this point. Now, starting with the map that we currently have in-game, Hannah removed more or less everything, and she's also admitted to taking more or less the same approach with the swamp biome, so do expect a whole new look to the swamp biome in the upcoming weeks. Now, having a blank canvas is great, but you need inspiration for any project to be lifted off the ground, and this started with a mood board, having a mixture of real-life inspiration, notably from Southeast Asia, which Hannah came up with based on the Spire Coast being a coastal biome sandwiched between two hot desert biomes. She goes on to later mention that a lot of what influenced her decisions was the idea of this biome being originally underwater and the petrified rock formations coming from that. It's a really cool idea for influencing the map, and from this point Hannah began blocking the islands, followed by overhauling the layout of the biome, adding larger elements such as the arches, bridges, the spires, and the various height levels within the same biome. It's a bit like building a body by adding layers to a skeleton. Once the two block passes were done, focus shifted towards the different mix of foliage. Something that interested me was that Hannah, when sculpting these biomes, has a limited asset count that she's able to use per world tile, as the more assets used, the more of a performance drop the biome receives. So for the sake of all those who are looking forward to building massive factories here, thank you for thinking about the performance prior to the sculpting of this incredible biome. Following this, the assets were added to the block pass, such as adding coral plateaus, which really excites me as I love the idea of using the overhanging rocks as either ledges or roofs for potential factories. And at this point, there is the big foliage blockout, which brings the tiles that are being worked on to about 80% completion, at which point it is ready to be shared with the community. However, the last 20% comes down to lighting and the overall atmosphere and just extra finishing touches, which often takes a lot longer to perfect and get to that full 100% completion. Obviously, each tile within the biome has a different focus. Some parts of the Spire Coast are dedicated to the Great Canyon, others are to the islands, coral reefs and the spires, for example. Now, we do get our first glimpse of the Dune Desert Cliffs, and I love all of the waterfalls along them, making the map feel much more alive and less dry and barren. It's a really nice change, and I can really see through these pictures plans forming of sprawling spire factories that cling to the petrified cliffs. You can already see how the Dune Desert and the Spire Coast are starting to blend together, and I'm really intrigued as to how Michelangelo's point will be merged, but more on that shortly. When it comes to the assets, you'll notice that the corals are mixed between the blue crater assets as well as elements from caves and a few new coral assets. Now, this is great for making the world feel interconnected rather than an independent biome. And at this point, we're given a working map for the changes, and as it stands, all of the independent tiles within this biome. And you can see firstly just how much further the Spire Coast pushes out into the north, but secondly just how large this biome is, with it being just a little bit smaller than the Dune Desert. And these comparison shots really show off the scale of changes that are taking place. And it really does just blow my mind as to how beautiful it's looking. At this point, Snutt and Hannah went on to show the Spire Coast in the world editor, and more importantly for me, gave us a sneak peek at the work that Marie has done with the Dune Desert Cliffs. Do note that the waterfalls are all placeholders, but wow, I love the Oasis style plateau and could really use this for my HQ build idea that we were talking about in the last video. Coming away from the dune desert cliffs, the canyon just feels like it flows really well now. There's a much smoother transition between the northern forest going into the Spire Coast, and with it wider, it's a perfect natural causeway for logistics. And they also mentioned that if you do have factories along the Great Canyon, you're most likely going to be safe with them, at least compared to the other tiles within the biome. From the estuary, the area is much more closed off, both heading out to sea in the north, with this looking more like it's straight from the Lord of the Rings. They actually mentioned this in stream, but it really does, with like statues either side. We can do something with that. But also, if you look to the right, along the Spire Coast with this massive spire mountain, I guess you'd call it, we can also see where the 8 oil nodes are situated. The reason why we couldn't see them prior is that the decals for the oil hadn't actually been placed on the sandbanks. They all seem a lot more spread out across the biome, and I'm really dying to hear about the extra ore nodes that they're considering adding to this area, but again, that won't be for update 6, unfortunately. Snutt then goes on to say that there's a reason for the water that makes sense as they currently stand coming out of those cliffs right at the top. And you can actually see the reason why in the image. As to what that reason is, I have no idea really, judging from this image, but if I do hazard a guess, looking at other arches, you can actually see scattered around the map that it's apparent that these arches, or like shards, spires sticking out, then they're not natural. So could these broken arches be the skeletal frames of a planet being terraformed? Is that what Fixit is actually doing? Fixing a barren planet? Maybe. In which case, it could make sense as to why water's being brought out from the top, if under the surface there's just a whole new world being developed. But if you have any better suggestions, do let me know in the comments below. And if you agree that this particular point should be called Michelangelo's Point, join me on Twitter and let me know. I can see it perfectly forming here. It's beautiful. The link to my Twitter is below. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little breakdown of the stream. And of course, special thanks does go to all of our amazing supporters, notably our Solar Eclipse patrons, The Calamity, Cerebral Tag, James Irwin, Jerry2, Popcat, and Firefless, as well as our Lunars, Dixie Chris, Lord of July, and Ben, as well as our Blood Moon of the day, which today is Papa Snoozy. Until next time, guys, as always, ciao for now.